This film was shot simultaneously in 8 cities as homeless people took over empty houses on May 1st, 1990.
My name's Watson.
Where do you live?
We don't really have a house
Why not?
because something happened a long time ago to make us become homeless.
So what did you do?
5 of us took over this here house. And this is Lucy from 1818 Stanford Street.
It made more sense to me to take this house that was empty than to walk around the street sick and cold.
It's very close and very nice friend of mine. And this is Jerry.
Hello.
He's very busy. I don't know if y'all want to bother him now.
Thank you.
This is Alexis Baptist.
It can happen to anybody. So many people have come to shelter. It's like I never even thought about it until it happened to me. Children are born into homelessness. There's babies in the shelter who have known nothing else but been homeless. It affects everybody.
Barbara Watson. She has a slip disc in her back, and the doctor told her she needs bed rest.
Is she someone special to you?
My mom. That's who I get all my knowledge from.
I became homeless due to my husband and myself had a business in New York City, and a maintenance business, and he had went to the bank to pick the payroll up Friday, and he got robbed and killed.
It was devastating because having somebody turn away from you like that, who you cared about very dearly.
We ended up being at my mother's, and my sister had a baby, and me and him were on a couch, and we kind of got, the house was too small, so I ended up taking the shelter route, and my sister said that she could take my son while I went to Dignity Shelter.
And I had nightmares over the night because I thought my mom was going to come back like my dad did.
When I did come around on the weekends, all I could remember was his eyes. We took these houses, and we're planning to take many more.
I like it now that me and my mom can live together.
We're together. We're a family. We're human beings. Everybody should have a place that they call home. And if this shell has to be what we call home, we're willing to stay here till Jack Kemp himself comes down and tells me that I have to go.
Jack Kemp is the head of HUD, a government agency. HUD's mandate is to help provide affordable housing for all Americans. When a homeowner can't pay their government mortgage, HUD repossesses their house. HUD has 50,000 of these houses standing vacant.
We asked HUD, could we see the house? We decided this was the house we were going to take. And on the way out, we just unscrewed a couple of bolts. We just came in through the back way. If my government has empty houses and I'm living in places that's unsafe or unfit for human habitation, then I should be allowed to live in a house that my government has. So I just helped them give it to me. Before we lived in a public housing project called Mill Creek out in West Philadelphia, and over 80% of the adult population in Mill Creek is drug addicted, crack, cocaine users. And it's always folks selling drugs and shooting and robbing. And so it was just no place conducive to raising children. We need to show our children and our grandchildren how we made a better America for them.
In Philadelphia, we've taken 4 houses thus far. The way we work our organizational committee is each house is represented by 2 members of a coordinating committee, and we meet several times a week.
America right now is saying it don't give a damn about 60 million people that are poor and about 10 million of them that are homeless, and the number is growing daily. I mean, we are in a crisis, and they're saying, oh, let's put them in a homeless village in Philadelphia. Let's put them out on an island in New York. Let's put them in the desert in California. History is being made, and what we do right here and now is going to shape America come year 2000. Next agenda, Jerry, house inspection for Wadsworth.
Okay, I want to get approval to go in ahead of time to take a look, just as we did with the other houses. Okay, just cut the lock, take a quick walk through. On my way out, lock it back up, and then formally on Tuesday, we will go take the house.
They might be paying close attention to what goes on the block, and I would hate for you guys to go in there and get arrested.
Well, no. What I'm talking about will be short and sweet. We'll be in. He can take the second floor. I'll take the first. He can take the second floor. I'll take the basement. We'll meet on the first floor. We'll be in and out in 5 minutes.
Today, I'm taking a risk, okay, because I am up for a position on my job, and I am up for an increase, okay? I'm up for a crew chief position. But I'd sacrifice all of that to be here, you know, because this is where I first started. This is where my heart is, in the housing takeover. Back some time ago, I had a very hard streak, you understand? Sort of saying a man, you know, is set in his ways. But I've learned to compromise. I've learned to have compassion, you know, and I've learned to fight.
It ought to step right through it.
These are old faithfuls.
That's right. Now take a look at this. This is a fine little neighborhood here, don't you think?
This is outstanding.
Okay, now at the end of the block here on the right is where we're going. See where that yellow sign is right there, right upstairs. You will see the FBI sign in the window. See it?
Oh, yeah.
That's where we're going.
Okay.
Let me get out. We have an interested neighbor here, but there's no sense in holding back here because we're not shy with one guy walking his dog. You ready to roll, Charles? Okay, just go for it right beside my finger.
Right here?
Yep. Oh, you open them babies up and pinch them closed, and you got it. That's the ticket. Whoa.
Whoa. I'll go up on the second floor.
Okay. What I think is a functional fireplace. Okay, one of the first things we want to look for here is at the top of the steps there should be a HUD inspection sheet. Okay, this house was last inspected 4/25. It was just inspected last week by our buddy Mr. McCarthy, which means they won't be here for another 2 weeks for an inspection. Whoever was evicted from here or whoever was foreclosed upon got up and left real quick. Okay, we're gonna have to work on some plumbing work. Okay, 1, 2, 3 big upstairs bedrooms. Okay, upstairs looks good. No holes in the ceiling, no holes in the floors. The plumbing looks okay. Nice kitchen, which is gas. Okay, we see we have no water. Okay, these steps look pretty safe here, so they feel good. Water is off from the street. Okay, but have the technology for that. Okay, the gas we don't want to mess with. Now this is the thing here. See, all our copper is still here.
Jerry
So this place is
eventually got laid off from his job. We couldn't afford the apartment we were living in anymore, and all our belongings were taken. I became ill, lost my job. I'd been in the hospital for about 7 weeks, and that I didn't find out until I left the hospital that Jerry had been homeless, with nowhere to live. I never really understood what was going on until I was one of the people being abused by the government. I mean, I thought I did. I thought I knew what homelessness was, but I didn't.
We got to get out of here.
Yeah.
Okay, because we don't want to jeopardize our plans here by hanging out here too long. Boy, oh boy, these people left their bicycles.
Gee, it's a car in there.
Yeah. We're going to take this house tomorrow. Absolutely. No question about it. And we got no reaction from the neighbors here.
This takeover movement should not be unexpected. There are over 6 million people without homes and a hell of a lot of empty houses. I mean, there's no excuse for the kind of living conditions people are made to live in the so-called United States. Give me a break. I mean, we got more money in the United States than anybody in the world, as far as I'm concerned. There's no excuse for the conditions of homelessness and poverty that's going on. See, what happened is a lot of us got together out of necessity. We had no place to stay, so we went to Thompson Square Park and pitched a tent. We didn't know that we would have to fight to live in the park. We didn't know that we had to fight to survive. We used the bathrooms. We thought our fight was ours and nobody else's. All we knew is that we were hurting and we were fighting to survive. Somebody came up to me and said, Cass, you should go to the Survival Summit in Philadelphia. I said, I don't want to leave the park.
Good morning, how you doing?
How you doing, buddy? Fine. I got to talk to brothers and sisters and kids and, people who actually are going through the same changes,
That's for wages, that's for housing, that's for food, that's for clothing, that's everything.
Right here.
People who feel that kind of pain, instead of just accepting it like we have been all our lives, started to organize, started to try to think of a way to get out of poverty. When we got done with the summit, our intention was to take HUD any way, shape, or form. We went to Washington to get HUD.
What do we want? Housing! What do we want? Now! What do we want? Housing! What do we want? Now! What do we want?
It took us 3 weeks to get to Washington. Over 300 people. Hurricane Hugo, a hassle by state troopers, 5 women having miscarriages.
From Tent City. Here we come. Casanova, come on through, brother. Do it.
All right, Casanova.
And myself, and we are half an hour late, but that's okay. That doesn't keep us waiting for far too long.
Goddamn right.
So let them wait on us now. That's right. We're going to go in. We're going to meet with Jack Kent. We're going to present Jack Kent for our resolutions that was came from you. And it'll best be up to them.
I have a lot of respect for Leona Smith and the Union of the Homeless because it's the first time I ever seen people who are homeless and other people get together to do something. I went up there scared and worried and praying out the way up there that nobody downstairs would do something to get shot.
Houses! Now! All night long! We're going to take houses! We're going to take houses!
Yeah, housing now. We commit that in 1990 we will make available 10% of HUD's single-family inventory of affordable housing for the
Well, what we got out of HUD was this letter telling us that 10% of low-income housing was going to go to the homeless people. This is what we came out for, to take something home to our people. So we wanted to believe what was said in that paper.
Okay, move it out!
And we did believe it. We marched all the way to Washington, not to listen to the President of the United States, not to listen to no movie star or politician, to make it plain that homeless people and people of poverty are taking their own initiative. We waited for the opportunity for us to speak. We got to realize that they had no intention of letting us speak.
So let's take it in. Let's take it in because we fired up. All right. Let's bring it in. We're fired up. We're Takeover. We're fired up. We're fired up. We're fired up.
The women, they don't think about it. All they say is, fuck it, we need housing, we need homes, we need food, and they lead. And I follow.
No more. Homeless can speak for themselves. Homeless speak for themselves.
It seemed like every time somebody spoke for us, we got more and more in the hole.
Poverty pimps. We can speak for ourselves. We don't need you.
We knew that the battle was going to be come right there at that fence for us to speak. Had not they let Leona Smith speak, we would have torn down that fence and the stage.
When do we want it? What do we need?
Housing.
When do we need it?
Now.
The struggle is not over, my sisters and brothers, until every single homeless man, woman, and child in America have a right to a decent, affordable housing and a right to a decent quality of life. It does not stop. It does not stop. No beef. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm now going to introduce to you Casanova, who has come to speak to you from Tent City, New York. The only difference is that he walked the 300 miles.
Hey, we made it, huh? We finally made it. I also want you guys to remember, we got something going with HUD. It's small, it's tentative, but we got something. We got something to take home to the rest of our people that didn't make it out here. It's our duty, it's our job to go back and keep this fight going, no matter what anybody tells you. Keep it going.
Going back home was and is a struggle because though we got this letter from Mr. Camp and HUD, we had to make that paper or that letter work for us. Throughout the country, homeless people were trying to get their 10% from HUD. As it turned out, that piece of paper was not even worth the value of toilet paper. No getting around it. It was just there to pacify us.
That news conference. I ain't see nothing about that. I watched it. It's in today. In Newsday today.
I myself never had any intention of becoming an activist. I've been a pacifist all my life. We have been accepting the degradation that the government is giving us. So out of a necessity, Tent City became an organization.
Well, this to me is Merry Christmas, New York. I mean, this is the utmost of Christmases. I never had a good one before, but this was even worse. Parks Department, which we choose to call the Green Ninnies, the police and the fire department came and got us. Well, anyway, they came, they destroyed, they conquered, they gave us their 10% of HUD.
Remember, we're dying in the streets, but if we gotta die this time, I'll put it to you this way, my point. If I gotta die this time, I'm gonna die ripping the boards down from these buildings. I'm gonna die trying to make a home for myself. I'm not gonna die because they wanna sell me drugs. I'm not gonna die because they want me on welfare. I'm not gonna die because they want me in the shelter system. I'm gonna die because I wanna live. And that sounds pretty weird to say it. I can't express it any other way.
By April, all our organizing came to a point. We planned a national homeless housing takeover.
Hello, everybody.
This May Day is a time where people all over the United States are going to be taking houses.
On Tuesday, May 1st, we're going to go into at least 5 houses, which have been standing vacant. Most of them will probably be HUD houses.
Take a house to keep the police and the doctors away. Take a house. You'll be very happy.
Tuesday morning, we're going to take over a house in Los Angeles.
People need homes now. We need education, jobs, and affordable housing now. We don't need promises anymore.
And that's why we're going to start taking over homes here, and in the future, we're going to do that in the future too. So
this action will not stop us. We won't stop. We intend in the future to continue to take sites as we identify them and turn these projects over to homeless families.
I miss home, man. I miss home. It's rough sleeping with 60 guys at night.
Get your babies off the streets, out of the shelters, out of the subways, out of the sewers. Come and take a house.
I live here at the building you are looking at. I've been here since April 7th, and I'm with the Up and Out and Out Poverty for the homeless. I go to school, and I'm on general assistance, but I'm going to school to better myself so I can get out of poverty. I'm a veteran, and the veteran program they got ain't worth nothing, you know, so we see no help here in the city of Minneapolis. There's no housing. In this building, we have something like we started out with about 3, now it's about 40 people in this building.
What we're trying to do is we're trying to build the largest poor people's movement this country has ever seen, okay? And we need each and every one of you involved to help us. We have a right to have food and clothing and shelter, and there ain't no damn reason why they could tell us that we don't deserve any of those things. Those are basic human rights.
I was pregnant and was living in a car for a while and went back to my car the next morning, and some drunk driver had totaled my car. So then I began sleeping in the alleys in downtown Minneapolis.
All we know is that we have a government that has forgotten about us, that could give 2 shits if we just rolled over and died. You guys understand what I'm talking about? Yeah. Okay, how many of you are thinking about possibly getting involved on May 1st? We need each and every one of you, okay?
How can you say that you're homeless and you want somewhere to live, but there's somewhere to live and you're afraid to participate with the folks that are saying, come on, let's have some place to live.
That's right.
You know? So, you know, if you really want somewhere to live, then you gotta do more than whistle.
When my son was very, very small, we had to stay in shelter or in people's houses. We were going to be homeless on April 1st, but he sort of backed down And then now May 1st, we're going to be, definitely are going to be homeless. I'm from the Boys Fort band of the Chippewa tribe. We can't pay the whole thing because they only give us $621. So we pay $600 for this place. We've got the lights to pay for, the gas to pay for, and everything. So it's kind of hard on me. Good girl. All right. Way to go, girl. That's a good girl. I didn't want to go to another shelter. So then all of a sudden, Mayday came up, and I decided might as well go for it.
Scattered through the graveyards of wasted city blocks, the snaggle-toothed, hollow-eyed shells of abandoned buildings standing like old, wounded animals, waiting to die. What the fuck happened here? I said to a passerby. He looked me dead in the eyes and replies, they raped and murdered another neighborhood, turning the once happy tenants into homeless, hopeless refugees, left to wander the graveyard streets of the city.
I was illegally evicted. I had been in a hotel which was paying $50 a night. I asked for a lease in order to be rent stabilized. The landlord's response was to just pack up my stuff and kick it down, literally kick it down the stairs.
Hate, anger, fear take hold. Crime becomes king. Another poor neighborhood shot through the head and left for dead.
And I was formerly a homeless person with AIDS, and I lived for 5 years in a squat on 8th Street, which was arsoned and then torn down by the city. So if I didn't have friends, I probably would have been on the streets getting sicker than I am now.
Then they treat pregnant women, people that ain't got nothing, like nothing, and it ain't no prejudice thing no more. They treat everybody like that. If you ain't got a decent income, they treat you like fucking dirt, man. The shit we go through, I can't get over it. I'm a veteran. I was in the Marine Special Forces, but now I gotta get on the welfare after I fought for this fucking country and be treated like that.
I've been down here pretty much since 1965. You know, I got my kids were born down here. And my brother died down here, overdose, and you know our friends died and froze to death on these benches and so forth and so on. So you know when we talk about the fight that's going on in the park, it's not necessarily the issue of the park. The issue is homelessness and poverty.
All right, how's it going, bro?
We have one common goal, and one thing we cannot disagree with is the fact that we need houses. We need these buildings opened up to the people who are homeless and people of poverty. So that is a uniting force, if nothing else. That is able to bring all different types of people and organizations together to fight the one common enemy instead of fighting each other.
The best thing about this event is that it's brought the movement together so that we are working together for the most part like we haven't in the past. We need housing. And then we have other actions that no one is going to know about, but they will happen and buildings will open today. That's a fact. People who haven't had housing will have it today.
In Oakland, we're ready to stop these auctions to get our 10% of houses that Kent promised. But HUD auctions them off to private real estate speculators who resell them at a huge profit. We're left with nothing.
The bid is now closed.
Wait a minute now.
That house belongs to the homeless, not to HUD. The Oakland City Council asked you not to sell them.
Oh, look at this, Remy. He's having our people put out.
Yeah. Arrest the real
In every city, HUD is going back on their promise. In Oakland, 28,000 poor people are waiting on lists for HUD assistance.
There's another one to add on. If you don't leave right now, we are going to put our hands on you.
You should be arresting yourself. Thieves! You're nothing but a bunch of thieves.
You're the crooks in here. You're the crook.
No, I cannot
Officer,
walk
take him down to the stairs.
Do not touch me.
Go to the stairs.
All right, I got a lawsuit. I told him I can't walk down the steps. I have a cyst on my leg. Why are you waving? Don't rub her out. Do not rub her out. Oh, they're gonna ask for injuries. Hey, no, wait a minute. Don't. Wait. She is a lady and you. This is mine. If you push me, I can go down these steps.
Stand back. You understand me?
No, I don't.
This is my building. My building.
Stop twisting her arm.
He's got a right to say whatever he wants.
Each year, there's more and more poor people and fewer affordable houses. But there are houses out there, and they're rightfully ours. This is our government, and those houses are our houses.
I hope they give us the houses. I really do. But even if it does mean staying for a couple of weeks or whatever, that's what we're going to do.
If the truth should be known, I'm a coward. To the bone. And cowards don't do too good, not down here in my neighborhood.
Even if they do tease me, that doesn't mean nothing much because they don't know what it feels like to be homeless themselves.
And if breaking laws are what you have to do to change them, then that's what I'll do.
Until it gets drugs.
301 Wadsworth is the nicest HUD house I have ever seen. We went in there today and took a look. There's a sunken living room with functional fireplace.
I love it. So basically, the property is livable. It's sound and it's livable.
Right now. It's an awesome house.
Okay, now I'm quite sure that there's going to be a lot of opposition in the community.
When we entered the block, there was a guy walking up the street with his dog.
Okay.
This guy, he's Preppyville, put it that way. So by now, the word is out.
Oh boy. Do we go in tonight?
Let's say we go in here tonight, right? Let's select who goes in there, but we still got to be at the shelter tomorrow because we still got folks lined up to give us support and da-da-da-da. It's like people are building up anticipation for tomorrow, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if we just go in there tonight and don't go down here and communicate with our support group and stuff like that, then we might lose
Well,
it.
one of the things that we're not going to do is send all of the leadership in there tonight.
Okay.
Everybody don't need to go.
electricity in this house.
Hi there, can I have the news desk? Okay, I'll tell you the story. We are the National Union of the Homeless, and we're taking HUD houses again today, all over Mount Airy. Okay, location number 1 is 301 Wadsworth. We are in that house now, and we're not moving until the federal marshals come and get us.
If this doll baby belonged to Deanna, who is my 5-year-old, her name probably would be Kathy. The only thing that would make me leave my baby's doll baby, you know, I'm just guessing, is that the mom you know, said I had to just grab my children and run for her life. If Kathy belonged to Deanna, no matter where we was at, she would be in pain and she would be fretful and throwing tantrums because it's like I made her leave her baby. You know, it's like me leaving my baby. You know, that's what this baby would mean to the average little girl, and I don't think she willingly left her baby. And I think that they were forced. And I know they were forced out of here by HUD, but I don't know who else forced them out. Sit right here, Kathy. I'ma find you a new mommy.
We're staying in this house at 301 Wadsworth until the federal marshals come and take us out.
Wave the flag on the 4th of July and celebrate Veterans Day. And this is what their country do to them.
Black family, yeah.
They throw them away just like that.
And I think, you know, once people can begin to realize the power that we have, we can turn this country upside down.
Nyla's going to get a house today. And all of us are going to see to it that she does.
All right. Do it.
Go ahead.
Speech.
Go ahead. Just say I'm going to get a house. No?
No.
She doesn't want to talk right now.
Let's get the show on the road. We get the move on this housing. Let's take on the housing now. The heck with all the rest of the speeches. Let's get started, take care of business. Let's get the show on the road.
Oh, it looks beautiful.
I like it. It's nice.
Light bulbs? They would be. Okay. It's right here. Okay. Let's see. I just turned 15 when I had Tina. So, so I was a pretty young mother. Oh no. It looks like the fuses are blue.
We're gonna have to go get some fuses.
Fuses.
What?
Fusers. What I am is a homeless mother.
Okay.
And I don't ever want to be homeless again.
This is my home right here.
What do we want? Housing! When do we want it? Now! What do we want? Housing! When do we want it? Now! What do we want? Housing! When do we want it? Now!
At least 200 of these in the city of Tucson that are sitting empty right now, and they jacked the prices up sky high so that poor and homeless people can't afford to buy a house like this. And then as soon as it sits on the market for a couple months and nobody buys it, then they come in real quick and they lower the price and they have an auction. They take bids for like 2 weeks. Bang, they come in and they sell this piece of property, and they sell it right underneath people like you and me that could use a house like this. It's not a fancy house, but it's a house. It's better than sleeping under these bushes out there in the street, and it's better than having somebody hit you in the head with a brick and try to kill you. And I say we live here. I'm going to live here.
This has been planned for a long time, and this was the day. All of us was not only celebrating the unity of everybody in Times Square Car Park, but an anticipation of the housing takeover.
It's on 9th Street between C and D.
The reason why we're doing it now is because our friends, which we weren't sure of in the past, became our brothers. It's actually, their job was to distract the police while we took houses.
Right.
While we were taking housing, the job of the people in the park was to distract the police. Unfortunately, the police had an ulterior motive in mind. Their job was to kick butt.
Something jumping off at the park. What?
The band.
No, but no. I'm talking about heat. I know. The police are racing over there.
Get the band.
Right now, I was just going out of the park, okay, to get some help, and the cop told me, bam, right in my motherfucking face. It's time for war. We gonna fucking fight now because of the fact that they fucking started it, and we ain't gonna end this shit until the fucking pigs get out.
No housing, no peace.
Nah, I mean, the demolition, it's just a lot of junk, you know what I'm saying? Couches.
One thing I learned tonight, if I didn't learn anything else, it can be done. You understand? It can be done if people just take the initiative and break it in. You gotta forget about it being against the law. I don't care. I'm dying in the streets. I think that should be against the law.
You got a house we ain't got near, so we can go to jail for that, right? Yeah, right. Excuse me, Count, but the language, they was some damn fools because it's like this. Who in their right mind can lock a person up just for taking a vacant house because he ain't got a home? Just like that commissioner, you see, he came down there nice and spiffied up, nice and clean. He got a luxury home somewhere, probably in Bloomfield Hills somewhere. He living comfortable. Me, I'm starving day to day.
He say, let's tear this motherfucker up. It's already open, man.
And I'm encouraging everybody that's out here with me today, take a house to keep the police and the doctors away. Take a house. You'll be very happy.
I'm homeless. I'm homeless. You or the city or anybody.
Right now. What we need to focus on, though, too, is that the federal government is not a partner with us. Rest assured, I will be in deep weeds downtown on Monday morning. I think there are some of us that have a different perspective than others do.
But how does that help the people that are sleeping in the streets? That doesn't even make any sense. You either move on this or you don't. We've been hearing this for however long.
What do you want me to do? Right now, what do you want me to do?
I just want to say one more thing.
While we were at the meeting, the HUD officials boarded up the house.
Nice living arrangements,
Try that again.
Do they want us to leave? They're going to have to arrest us.
You can keep the cops off our backs.
I'm not, okay, I'll make it very clear. I'm not sending the police over here. If they come, there's nothing I can do to stop them from removing.
We were really expecting the police to come. We unboarded the house and cleaned up the mess that was left by the HUD officials.
Get this boy up here. What?
Hey, miss.
But they did come in and
Yes?
keys.
Who is that?
I forgot what it was.
Who is that?
Can I use the bathroom?
So everybody came over and started milling around and talking to each other and stuff. They were kind of afraid that Matt and myself were going to be the only ones in there.
And I think maybe we should just keep taking houses and go back to our houses and go back in.
I mean, we have enough people here between two houses even. I mean, we could still have 10 people in each house. And that's still...
I think we gotta go out to more houses. I mean, it's just real important. We came here, we made a stand here, but we got to, you know, go out and go to other houses, and we have to get some of these supporters out.
I think we'll come out better just going back over to these other houses and let us arrest individually or whatever. You know, we better go for, I better
Or
go
maybe
for
they'll that. leave us alone, and I think we ought to go talking about taking more houses.
Right.
I'm going to have to go back to my place, too, because the neighbors are wanting to know what's going on and what
Okay.
they can...
There's
Because
personal
they want to do something. I don't know if they'll come over to this place or not, but...
I
there's-
bet as soon as everybody goes, so the cops come.
They're here.
What? They're here. Go.
I was arrested. The kids were put into St. Joe's Home for Children. So I wasn't sure whether they'd come back to me or not.
Good morning.
The nerve of you people taking such a home. You derelicts, how dare you?
Is this still morning? So what do you think of this house on that?
This is another great success.
Why?
Because all the homeless people come together and they show HUD that we can do something.
We've taken 5 houses in March. We've held our houses. We took this house today, and we're going to keep on taking them because Jack Kemp promised the homeless people of America 10% of all HUD houses across this country. I'm not content because I'm in a comfortable, beautiful house when there's brothers and sisters and people dying in the street. Something is wrong in America, and we are here to straighten it out. This is our country.
When you stick them in the mailbox, let them hang out of the slot a little bit so the people see them when they get home, okay?
politicians here, the mayor, the police, the committee people, they're afraid because they never have seen homeless people stand up and take charge the way they're doing here.
Is somebody in charge here?
Let's give a hand for Philadelphia Finest.
Mayor Good told HUD point blank, let HUD send the feds in if they want these families and babies put out of these houses.
Me and my mom are now tenants at the Dignity Housing Program.
Homeless Philadelphians are running a program that they call Dignity Housing. It provides Ahmed and hundreds of people with homes. Jerry, Lucy, Barbara, and the others continue to take houses.
In Oakland, there have been many takeovers and many arrests. The pressure and publicity forced Oakland to turn over $2 million in land to begin construction of Dignity Housing West. In the most recent takeovers, the city hasn't been able to evict us.
In Detroit, the controversial arrest resulted in such a public outcry that the homeless were released from jail. The Homeless Union has been joining with tenants from housing projects to block the bulldozing of public housing.
In Minneapolis, the homeless took 15 houses and an apartment building. This led the city to develop a multi-million-dollar dignity housing program to be run by the Up and Out of Poverty Coalition, which led the takeovers. Nyla Columbus finally got out of jail and got her children back. She married Matt Grimmins, who she met during the takeovers.
Casanova has left New York and is organizing in Kansas City. But the homeless from Tompkins Square Park who took the building are still there. It's been hard going. And every day, another 2,000 Americans become homeless.
But up from the wounded streets comes the cry. This neighborhood ain't ready to die. 'Cause we got songs that are yet to be sung, and balled up fists with blows to be flung. So, sing your death song in some other tongue, and do your death dance on somebody else's stage. 'Cause this neighborhood ain't ready to give up the ghost. We're planning on living our lives to the very utmost. To live, not die. This is my neighborhood. This is where I come from.
Wow, what a powerful, powerful story. Kind of teared up there for a second. Hello, everyone. My name is Doherty Hester, and I am a proud member of the Homes Guarantee Campaign at People's Action. I will be facilitating the panel with our stellar guests this evening. I first want to start off by saying thank you, Savina, Chris, and Kristen, for taking the time to join us and for leading absolutely visionary and groundbreaking direct actions. In the face of this eviction crisis, Your leadership and imagination are an inspiration to unhoused people and tenants who are having to fight for the right to a safe space to call home in the middle of this global pandemic. All right, we want to start off by giving all of our panelists a few minutes to introduce themselves to our grassroots leaders and call attendees. Let us know your name, please, and your pronouns if you'd like, where you are, and a little bit about where you came from. How about we start with Savina?
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for inviting us to this great evening. And I'm so happy that you got a chance to see the historic documentary by Peter Kenoy entitled Takeover. So Sabina Martin is my name. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I currently live in a small town called Braintree, Massachusetts. I was raised in Roxbury, Massachusetts, just outside of Boston. So about 35 years ago, I left the military and joined the National Union of the Homeless. And I always say that I'm a lifelong card-carrying member. That's a little bit about myself.
Thanks. Kristen?
Hi, thank you so much for having us. My name is Kristen Colangelo, she, her, hers. I am currently in South Jersey, right outside of Philadelphia. I was a young person in the First National Union of the Homeless, Maryland and Virginia area, and came up through some of the organizing around in 80, I'm going to forget, but this is where oldness comes. For age comes in. I forget the year. I think it was about 89 or 87, 89, somewhere around there. Another large takeover that happened that really built the Maryland and Virginia Union. And then going into the Housing March of 1989, and what happened after was part of the demise of the Maryland and Virginia Homeless Union. So it really shaped who I am. It shaped my thinking, my analysis around, the country and what's happening with homelessness. I've struggled with homelessness on and off a few times in my own life, and being part of the union, Savina says a card-carrying, longtime member, and I feel like that the homeless union, agreeing with Savina, the homeless union and the knowledge and the understanding it gave me saved my life in many ways when I struggled with my own homelessness. It helped me focus my anger and my frustration in the right place, not inside, which is what is meant to happen. So I'm very honored to be here. I'm also part of the new reestablished homeless union. Homelessness right now is just, it's disgusting. I don't know any other word. Heartbreaking and growing every day. And the union now is in 20 areas of the country, and we are organizing and organizing and organizing. And I'm really happy to be here with you all. Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Kristen. Chris?
Thanks so much for having us here. My name is Chris Caruso. I use he, him pronouns. I live in New York City currently. And in 1989, I was a first generation college student, went to Philadelphia. I had dreams of upward mobility and financial success. And on my very first day of college, I met Willie Baptist, who was a mentor to a number of us, and got put on this path. That was in my first week of college. I was doing, student support for takeover houses in North Philly. And, coming from a kind of stable working class background, I, going to this elite school in Philadelphia, like in the same week, I met, very, very, very rich people that I just did not know existed, people that took a helicopter to the Hamptons for the weekend kind of people. And I met, homeless fighters. and like literally within the same week for the first time in my life. And this immediately raised fundamental questions about what is the nature of this society? What is happening? Like, how can this be? And, you know, I got immersed in organizing with the Union of the Homeless, and have been involved with grassroots anti-poverty work ever since. Currently working with the University of the Poor, which is a grassroots political education organization, as well as the Cairo Center at Union Theological Seminary. That's one of the anchor organizations for the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. And today's Poor People's Campaign is built in part off of networks of, you know, poor and homeless people organizing themselves that began to be assembled during the period that this movie Takeover has covered.
Thanks so much, Chris. Thank you all so much. With that, let's go ahead and get started with our Q&A section. We'll begin with questions from our grassroots leaders. So there's a Q&A at the bottom of your screen where you can drop your questions. And then we'll spend some time allowing the panel to respond to the questions asked by folks who are attending the call with us this evening. So if you have a question for the panel, like I said, please drop it into the Q&A box and we'll try to get to as many of the questions as we can, okay? So like to start off the Q&A section, can I ask, what is the National Union of the Homeless, and what is the National Union of the Homeless's plan in response to the COVID-19 pandemic with the government's failure to protect unhoused people? Okay, so that's a double whammy two-part question.
I think we can kind of split it up here, but to complete my qualification, I came into the National Union of the Homeless some 35 years ago. United States Army veteran, left the military and joined the National Union of the Homeless. And as time went on, I became engaged and interested in, because of the structural causes that I was beginning to see around people not being able to afford decent, adequate housing. I knew that something was inherently wrong. I began feeding homeless people on the street. Eventually, after experiencing homelessness as a young veteran myself, I met up with Chris Sproul, who was in Boston, in Cambridge, Mass, on a tour to build local unions all over the country. And in most of the urban centers, that's where in 1985, 86, 87, the tours of the unions were concentrated because of the visible expression of homelessness was mainly in some of the urban centers. Eventually we got together because we came up with the different slogans and our mission statement, which was about revolutionary perseverance and ending oppression and raising, attention to the plight, fight, and insight of homeless men and women on the street. We were at that time coming out of many, many different economic struggles. I think at that point in time in the 80s, President Reagan had cut the housing stock enormously. And left us with no other choice but to organize, right? But to organize, like we say, to take back what's ours. And so when we came up with the mission statement, we also knew, memorized, and stated all over the country that the National Union of the Homeless is an organization that's made up of current and former men and women and families who were fed up with the system. We were made up of children, adults, people of every religious and nationality came into the union because we knew that we needed to build power and have the National Union of the Homeless led by the people most affected. It was led by the poor to build an army of the poor. Of the most poor and dispossessed section of the working class. So we were out of work. Some of us were working, living paycheck to paycheck, and not having the decent and adequate health care. So that's what the Union of the Homeless is and was then. and it's now, and it is now. And I'll throw it over to Kristen or Chris to talk about the now and the resurrection or the re-emergence of the National Union of the Homeless, as we're on the edge and the precipice of experiencing mass dislocation and resistance on every level from this section of the poor and dispossessed.
Thank you so much, Sabina. So the second part, are you going to answer that for us, Kristen?
I was going to ask Chris if he wanted to hop in, or I can. It's up to you.
Yeah, well, just to, by way of framing that response a little bit, is that, of course, housing takeovers were happening already, right? Before the Union of the Homeless came along. Tent cities were happening already. That when people are thrust into a life and death survival situation, people get really creative really fast and come up with solutions, right? And so it's not as if the Union of the Homeless invented, you know, the housing takeover or the tent city, but what we did was, you know, connect with communities where this was already going on and politicize this activity. We would, you know, link this direct action survival work, we call them projects of survival, you know, getting these families out of these, you know, absolutely dangerous, violent, rat-infested shelters, you know, putting them into safe, you know, federal housing urban development HUD homes that were, you know, were not occupied. We would do advanced work with the neighbors before we put a family in, explain to them the situation, explain that instead of this house being left vacant and, you know, maybe becoming a crack house, maybe, you know, running down your property values, we are coming in, we have support, we're going to fix it up. So we built neighborhood trust. And, you know, what the media saw was like the tip of the iceberg of what we were doing and what was going on, right? That we had certain families that were more experienced or maybe a little more brave, a little ready to deal with the media spotlight, that were the ones we advertised, we invited the press to. We said, we are going to make this a national issue. We are not going to allow this country to ignore this crisis of homelessness. So we're going to shine a spotlight on it through this act of civil disobedience. But for every family that we, you know, advertised, hey, we're doing a takeover, come, you know, come press, come watch us, you know, there were dozens that we were doing behind the scenes with families that weren't prepared to do that, that it wasn't necessarily strategic to do that, and building a base. And so I think it's important to know that, you know, it's not like, you know, it's more like, you know, you don't make movements out of nothing. You like surf movements, right? You find stuff that people are doing, and then you help bring people together. You help collaborate. You help political educate. You help scale. And so obviously we're in another, you know, huge major economic crisis right now, you know, certainly worse than the 2007 Great Recession, you know, probably the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. And of course, like, people are in motion because people have to be in motion. So tent cities, you know, are expanding exponentially. People are doing these housing takeovers, you know, on the down low, clandestine. In many cases, you know, people occupy their own homes that they've been evicted from illegally, right? But the point is, with this kind of rebirth of the Union of the Homeless, what we've been doing is sending around trainers, sending around political educators, connecting people, informing people of, you know, the experience from these decades ago that we have, you know, and have to share about, you know, how do you find plumbers who could illegally cut the water back on in the place? How can you find sympathetic electricians who could help us cut the power back on in places, right? Real, you know, survival skills that we could share. Combine this with political education that says, you know, what kind of society allows this? That in every city in the country, there's not a single, you know, one-bedroom apartment you could buy at minimum wage. In every city in the country, there's more empty, livable, you know, luxury housing units than there are homeless people. It's insanity. And so, you know, how do we, you know, bring consciousness, bring organization? And so, you know, we have dozens of new chapters of the Union of the Homeless, many of them on the West Coast, and California has been a particularly strong concentration this time. And I mean, I think, you know, everyone that's familiar with this issue knows that, you know, California has been really hard hit by this, you know, soaring real estate prices for a long time. And so, you know, this is what time it is. And so it was the June gathering of last year of the Poor People's Campaign in Washington, D.C., that the formal gathering was had to formally relaunch the National Union of the Homeless again. And, you know, we're, you know, the outpouring, you know, the people that need help, the people that are doing something, that want to know, you know, how to do it better, want to learn skills, want to, you know, not be isolated and alone with this, has meant that, you know, people have just had to rise up to this demand. And I think also it's worth saying that, you know, the statistics say that over 1/3 of tenants in this country have been late on their rent for the past 5 months. You know, people with mortgages are not able to pay their mortgages, and we've had this, you know, eviction moratorium from the Trump administration that has more holes than Swiss cheese. I mean, of course, evictions are still going on. There's this whole, you know, legal whack-a-mole that's going on. But one thing we do know is that without massive stimulus, without a massive intervention by the federal government that it looks like they have blown the shot at doing before the election right now, come January 1st, we're going to see a wave of evictions, a wave of homelessness like this country has literally never seen before in history. Unless there is literally a larger stimulus than the Obama period, a multi-trillion-dollar stimulus that could happen in the next, you know, few weeks, we are looking at an absolutely disastrous winter. And I think everyone that's, you know, conscious and aware need to be preparing for, you know, potentially a very dark, very difficult winter, as the federal government has essentially abandoned the population in the face of this pandemic and this, you know, recession, possible depression. And so I want to thank you for putting this event on, because I think this is such an important issue, and we all need to be raising the alarms about what's obviously coming. This train is coming down the track right at us right now.
No, absolutely, Chris. You're 100% right. Thank you both for your answers. And it's amazing to see that this, you know, this film is over 30 years old, but it could be this week. You know, it's the same situation, the same types of housing. And so that's really, really amazing. So I have a couple more questions. I have a question from Ryan. This is a specific question, but maybe y'all could think of a kind of generalized answer. Is there a union of the homeless in Dallas? I'm assuming that's Dallas, Texas. And if not, what are some of the things I can do to form a union of the homeless in my city?
So we do have a brand new organizing committee coming together in Houston, Texas. And also one of the leaders there is going to be part of we just restructured. As Chris said, we have a number of unions growing across the country. So we have split the country into regions, and we can connect you with the leaders in that region to help discuss what you can do. One of the things that is really powerful about the union is we don't have a cookie cutter kind of thing we tell people to do. We meet and we do what we call outriding, which Chris talked about, where the leaders of the National Union of the Homeless, our national advisors, Dr. Savina and also Willie Baptist, talk to people and get to know what they're facing, what's going on in your area. Now, we do know that there are a lot of things going on across the country that look the same. You know, flattening tent cities, having all these sanctions around housing, all these bans, these laws, all of that kind of stuff, but still tailoring it to what's going on in your area. So it is, one, connecting to those that are in the country around you, and we can definitely get you information on that. I'm hoping that you all get the National Union of the Homeless email. I get that, as well as a couple other people. One is connecting to the national union, and one is connecting to the region. And we have people all over the country that are thinking about these same things. So Chris talked about California. We also have a number up and down the East Coast and in the Midwest, in the South, and now also in the area that Texas is in, to connect you to other leaders, because we need to learn lessons from each other. And if we're just fighting homelessness in California, we're not going to win. And if we're just fighting homelessness, we're not going to win. We have to connect geographically around issue, and we have to connect as a class or across all fronts of struggle. So the Union of the Homeless gets, us together to be able to do that through this issue of a housing crisis in a time where we have, I think the statistic is 18 million empty houses, ready living empty houses, right? Livable, I believe the word is, and 10 million people who need them. And we need to come together. So whether you're from Texas or you're from Georgia or you're from Montana, the answer is the same. Email us, connect with those that are leading and those that are also trying to figure it out. And together, we will make this happen.
Thank you so much, Kristen. Let's see. We've got another question here. Someone is asking, and I just lost it, if you see sort of I lost it, but I remember the question. If you see sort of a bigger actions of violence from the police of people who are doing these takeovers and using, people-less houses than maybe in the 70s or 80s?
Could you just repeat that first part?
Sure. Okay, so the question is, do you see a major use of police violence, again, a major use of police violence when people do the takeovers of by unhoused people today? Is there more use of police violence today than in the 70s and in the 80s?
Well,
that you know of?
Thank you for that. That's a great question. Let us remember that what we were coming out of. We were already coming out of the 60s and the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King, mass rioting in urban centers all over the country, busing and the uprisings, and also COINTELPRO and the dismantling of the Black Panther movement, right? And, on and on and on. We all know that history. One of the things that happened in Philadelphia, I think around in 1985, 86, was one of the worst expressions of military occupation by Mayor Wilson Goode and the move. He actually literally had a helicopter deliver a bomb that's used in combat and killing 5 children, 11 altogether, 5 were children, to a family that was really based on saving the planet, right? They said, oh, they were this big Black liberation movement, but they were naturalists that were ahead of their time, speaking about ecological devastation. Now they were connecting the dots. I also think we know that we're seeing a greater move of militarized and occupied communities. We had Ferguson, right? And we know what just happened a few months ago with George Floyd. So we're definitely going to see that. Now, homeless men and women have always been criminalized, right? For hopping a bus, right? All of these qualitative life things that you need, like going to sleep, you get a ticket. You can't rest. They actually set up some kind of policy around people not resting. Now, back in the 80s, when we were organizing in that disgusting period, just like today, which is worse, we didn't have cell phones or computers, but we did it. Can you imagine today? Because we are up against, like Willie Baptist says, our mentor, we're up against a very sophisticated enemy. If we don't really study and understand what we're up against, we're going to fail, because the system has already failed. In the midst of abundance, it produces beggars and it produces homeless people. And we all have to come together and connect the dots, like the brilliance of the Poor People's Campaign. The interlocking evils of militarism, economic militarism, and systemic poverty and racism. We're connecting those dots together. And we're not going to need each other right now, right? So we should come together and formulate a plan of action. Just like Chris said, we are up against something. It's a runaway train. It's the engine that has fuel in it, and it's coming at us. And actions are happening right now. People are chaining themselves, and in different places across the country. We're not going to be able to stop it, but we know we have a movement right now. We're building this movement that's going to address some of these issues. I mean, head on and crazy, right?
Yeah.
It is what it is. Right?
Yep.
Like Trump
Thanks,
said.
Savannah.
You're welcome.
Kristen, did you want to add something?
I mean, I think Savannah brought it home. I think that the police violence, one side of police violence is increases as power increases, and the threat of the organization of the people increases. It's a very, it's a very violent, the most, we say that homelessness is the most visible expression of the system failing us, and police violence is the most violent expression on our people. And all the other ways that the state, lack of health care, lack of food, lack of access, this is all violence against our class. And this is why we need to be smart, and we need to be strategic, and we need to come together to build political power, because we can't outgun them, right? We can't out-military them, but we can out-strategize and go at their weakness and end the power that has the ability to pull guns on our class and our people. And that's why we build, that's why we organize. Everything we do is about building that, organizing that political power. And the political power means the power to change, the power to turn it around, the power to say, we're not going to live in a country anymore where 200,000 people have already died, in a country that has some of the best healthcare technology out there, but can't, because of the system, provide what we need quick enough. That's a system that we have to end, where anybody dies for any reason other than happily in their beds at the end of their life, which would be lovely. But this violence against us in all forms is what we're organizing against.
Yeah, Kristen, thank you so much, and for mentioning that the violence by the police increases as our power increases, right? And I think that that's a good segue to the next question, which Cole has a question. What were some of the main obstacles that made it difficult for the homeless unions to continue building power over time?
Ooh.
Loaded question, huh?
You're gonna take that one, Savannah? Or Chris?
We can split this up. There were so many things. There was so much that happened when we were organizing. Now, you all had saw the film. So when we were at the Housing Now March, but the night before the house, I mean, this is like a whole nother hour, but to shorten it up and to answer that question, one of the most major obstacles which we are experiencing today among the population of homelessness is the opioid crisis. Back then, they dumped the drugs in, the heroin, the crack cocaine was weaponized, and we call it chemical warfare. It was weaponized. Don't you understand that the rulers will use anything to stop a movement? Because just what Kristen and Chris said, power. Our power, just like Frederick Douglass says, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did and it never will. And we were building power and they didn't like it. And one way to take you out and take you out of your misery is to anesthetize you. People were on a mood and mind altering drugs, and we can't stagger our way to freedom. Now, if you choose to use, that's what you choose to do, right? You can choose to do that. But they left us no other choice, right? But to fight back. They saw our power and they dumped the drugs in. They had a drug truck in Washington, D.C., handing out drugs at night. Now, remember, we had organized people to come in from off the streets, out of the subway stations, out of the shelters. We had marches that marched. We had 5 heart attacks and 2 miscarriages along the way. They did not like it. So there was a lot that led up to, but one of those obstacles was the co-optation. I'm going to let Kristen talk about that. When we thought we were going to become housing developers, when people still couldn't make a livable wage. So I'm going to stop there.
Thank you.
If I could just add to what Savina said, I mean, I really encourage folks to look at investigative journalist Gary Webb's book, Dark Alliance, right? Which documented, I mean, it, you know, can sound like a conspiracy theory, but it was quite literally true that the CIA and intelligence agencies brought in crack cocaine to this country to help finance some of their dirty wars. This is all documented from court documents. And, you know, there was an absolutely targeted destruction of the Union of the Homeless. Partially, it was set up by the gender segregation of the shelter system, which meant that women and children could be in one shelter and men could be in another shelter. They deliberately separated families, right? And the homeless union at the time was more based out of the men's shelters than the women's shelters, and there was a population that was, you know, at that time particularly susceptible to the crack cocaine epidemic. And we literally, I personally witnessed, I know dozens of people who personally witnessed, you know, police would show up in uniform in police cars handing out, you know, just open palm, handing out drugs to people in our tent cities. Personally witnessed, you know, police would pick up, you know, someone who was having a really hard time, right? Maybe, you know, way too high or just having a mental, you know, an acute mental health crisis that might be violent. Instead of taking them to the police station, they would drop them off at Tent City and say, hey, these people got free food, you know, go fuck with them. And so, you know, deliberate kind of counterinsurgency, you know, very coordinated activities of the police to just constantly disrupt, you know, targeting people who are emerging as leaders, as spokesperson, the weaponization of family services to seize and steal children of especially articulate, vocal, visible women leaders, to snatch up their children to silence their voice, right? Over and over and over again in city after city around the country. This was literally, this was a low intensity warfare operation on the part of the police coordinating with the FBI and their various red squads in these cities. This was no joke, right? This is no joke. And of course, we know that now the level of surveillance has greatly, greatly increased from, you know, what we were dealing with at the time. But, you know, let me tell you that Frank Rizzo's police in Philadelphia at that time were no joke. But I wanted to do a quick plug before turning over to Kristen or the next question, that, you know, this movement has produced real leaders who have told their own stories, not filtered by academics or, you know, advocates or social workers. So there was a section in the movie about Casanova's story, right? He was the mayor of Tompkins Square Park in New York City, leading the homeless rebellion there. He wrote a book called Each One Teach One. His name's Ron Casanova. I highly, highly, highly recommend it. These are organic intellectuals rising up from the ranks of the poor, from the ranks of the unhoused, who took leadership, who fought these bastards and won significant battles, fought battles for hearts and minds. I mean, many of the slogans out of this movement, many people haven't heard of this movement from the 80s. Maybe you've heard of Tompkins Square Park, but these slogans, each one teach one, no justice, no peace, Tompkins Square everywhere. These were all slogans that came directly out of homeless people organizing themselves in this struggle. So I highly recommend Ron Casanova's book. You saw him in the movie. And then Willie Baptist, who many of us have mentioned, he has a book called Pedagogy of the Poor, Building a Movement to End Poverty, where he tries to distill a number of lessons that are coming directly out of this Union of the Homeless experience. You know, both formerly homeless Black men, leaders, organic intellectuals who, you know, tell it like it is and not through, you know, not through the various filters that are set up in our society in terms of who gets to speak to these questions and who just gets to, you know, tell our sad stories and leave the analysis to the so-called experts. So I really would be remiss not to make that point.
Love it, love it.
Can I just add to what my friends have said as well? And thank you, Chris, for holding up Casanova's book. The Each One Teach One is definitely a backbone, one of the lessons that we all stand on. And that comes back to leaders lead by teaching others. Really powerful. And one of the other slogans that comes out of that is, the more you know, the more you owe, which basically means as you are being developed, you take on developing others. So Savina and Chris both talked about the attacks on the homeless union and on other movements that were going on, the National Welfare Rights Unions, the Anti-Hunger Coalition that partnered up with us. I just want to make one point quickly about why. Why were we such a threat? We were obviously a threat. We've had other threats. When Martin Luther King moved to the Poor People's Campaign platform and brought together 4 days before he was assassinated, groups across all lines of division into one room. 4 days later, they took him out. Why did the attack on, were the Black Panther Party named the biggest threat in the United States? It wasn't the berets and the guns. It was the organizing across lines of division. That is the biggest strategy of those in power, is to keep us divided. And when you dedicate your work and your life to organizing across color lines, across lines of division, across race lines, across ethnic, across religion, that's the threat. And they come at you full force. And when we talk about, I think the question was, what were the barriers and what are you up against? And I believe in what I'm seeing, it was then as now, when we start to organize and we start to build, right? Because we don't mobilize for concessions, right? We're organizing people and building our base for a revolutionary change that ends a system that has killed 200,000 people in the last months, where 700 people froze to death even before this happened every year on the streets of this country, outside of abandoned houses, where we throw away more food than people need to no longer starve to death. That's a system that needs to be addressed across all lines. And when you start to really look at these lines of division and what their use is, and start to bring people together. We saw this in the tent cities of Kensington. Kensington, Philadelphia was one of the poorest districts in the country and the poorest district in Pennsylvania. And we brought together in there, it was 1/3 poor white, all working class, 1/3 poor Black, 1/3 poor Latino, and growing Asian population. And they were all brought together in these tent cities because they were all suffering from the same disease. But when they first came together, we had a lot of like white supremacy coming in, poor whites coming in and saying, whoa, right? And then we had a lot of Puerto Rican families, Puerto Rican mothers, right? They were saying, oh, hell no, I'm not staying here if that person's staying here. And then with some education and some community building and some love and compassion and understanding of what we have in common, not what divides us, people came together, and you couldn't get past the young white men that were doing security to even get near the children and the Puerto Rican families and Black families. And then the mothers would make sure that the people doing security, are they fed? Are they okay? Are they sleeping? Like, we became a family across these lines. That is the threat. The Rainbow Coalition is a threat. The Poor People's Campaign was a threat. And the Poor People's Campaign and National Call to Moral Revival, 2.6 million people at a gathering across all lines of division. Be clear, it's a threat. So what is the barrier? The barrier is not having the time after huge mobilizations to do the organization, the political education, the panning for gold, right? The getting in there. Organization happens after mobilization. And I just want to say again that we are not more mobilizing for concession. We are not mobilizing to house 50 people when 5,000 people in that community are still on the street. We are organizing for the political power for revolutionary change that changes that system, that rips the tree up and look at the cancerous roots underneath. And that is hard work, and that is threatening work. So what are the barriers? The barriers are, we are up against one of the most resourced, smart, ruling class, power class ever, right? Where you have 647 or something, Chris, I'm sorry, $1 billion made in just the last few months of the pandemic. They're organized. And as Willie said, and I think Savina said this, you know, a dumb force has never risen up and beaten a smart force. We're up against a really formidable enemy. And understanding that and coming together and learning what's the problem, what's the solution, what tactics do we use to fulfill that, and how do we constantly find leaders to bring us together across all these struggles. And that's hard work. So the barrier, one of the last barriers I want to say is, we have leaders that come and they're agitated through something painful and horrible and come in, and we have quick victories where we haven't been able to build the community yet and we lose folks. Or we have sad losses and people get very discouraged and leave. So we need more time to do the work, the building of the revolution. And we're up against, again, the state violence question, right? We're up against a state apparatus and a you know, owning class and a money class that is fighting to make that not happen. So that's you know, they have the time to build that organization.
Right. Thank you so much, Kristen. I think we have time for just maybe 2 more questions. So someone asks, is if HUD is still a powerful target to organize direct actions against?
Can I be the one that asked you to repeat that? I
was just about to. HUD still a target of power to organize direct actions against?
It's more of the research question.
I mean, you know, it was very specific in our time in the sense that the Housing Now March in '88, which you saw a clip of Ron Casanova speaking at the Housing Now March, which was an incredibly powerful historic march, got into the room with Jack Kemp, who at that time was the Secretary of Housing, and secured a promise for 10% of the federal HUD-owned housing stock would be turned over to the homeless. He actually signed a document. We had the you know, his signed document that was the kind of achievement, the kind of policy achievement of the Housing Now March. And then, of course, you know, there was foot dragging and, you know, they didn't make good on their promise. And so we did it for them. So we had people that were within, you know, different city housing authorities that would leak us lists of HUD-owned houses. And so we would take them and then we would say, look, just count this one towards the 10% you promised us and haven't delivered. And so we actually had a legal leg to stand on in terms of targeting HUD as a result of, you know, the self-organized activity of homeless people in the Housing Now March, which, you know, by the way, was, you know, there were some serious poverty pimps that tried to seize control of that march, and there was a massive power struggle with the people that actually represented the grassroots versus the, you know, kind of service provider type people. But that was, you know, historically specific. I mean, I do think, you know, in terms of maintaining housing takeovers as a kind of civil disobedience activity and of not getting in a situation of, you know, pitting one poor person against another, that I think that, you know, continuing to go after whether it's federal HUD owned or city owned or, you know, abandoned properties that are not held by a private individual who could then say, hey, why should this family be in a house when, you know, when I'm not, and blah, blah, blah. Like it sidesteps a lot of those potential issues to be going after, you know, a publicly owned property. So I do think in that sense, it probably, you know, still would make sense to consider, but folks have to, you know, you have to make an analysis. You have to make a power analysis of, you know, your city, your region, your state. I mean, like who can be moved, who cannot be moved, where are the weak points, where can alliances be built, and, you know, build strategies, you know, not just based on morality, but based on a, you know, very cold calculating assessment of, you know, what are we up against in our, you know, situation and locality. But I do think, you know, publicly owned in general, I think avoids some unnecessary battles and, you know, clearly keeps it framed as a civil disobedience activity, whether it's, specifically HUD or another agency, I think would depend on local conditions at this point in history.
Yeah. We were pretty successful in our own right because of the nationwide and synchronized takeovers. It was calculated, right? And it depends on your regions. I'll give you an example, like Massachusetts at that time was, what was up for grab was city-owned properties, right? With city-owned land. We got to think about the land also, right? We would set up tent cities. But the city-owned properties that had back taxes on, so the filmmaker was only able to go into 8 cities, but I think at the time there was like something like 17 cities as far down as Mississippi, Philadelphia, Mississippi. That's one of the smallest places and towns. But so we would look at city-owned property, and we also had friends. When you talk about support, we built a support network of a lot of people that had openings for us to go in. National Welfare Rights Union really, supported and guided us. The Anti-Hunger Coalition, some of the faith leaders, and also people that were located in City Hall that would give us the plans so that we could, look at the city-owned property that was in our area. And quite frankly, they should. If you go into the city, they should give you that information freely. I mean, I'm talking about then, I'm not talking about now. I haven't done a takeover in a long time. But, we're talking about mass dislocations getting ready to come up. And we're also talking about a winter offensive that we're in discussions about right now. People are going to need sanctuary like right now. So we're hoping to, as we build out and meet up with our organizations around the working poor, just like our Put People First Pennsylvania, the Medicaid Army, our healthcare folks, National Welfare Rights Union, and on and on. These are our allies and supporters and working poor in this country who are leaders in the movement now, right? And people are going to need sanctuary, right? So we hopefully, some churches aren't open. We need to address, the empty churches. People are going to need help now. That pie in the sky, selling the Brooklyn Bridge around housing, I'm not saying it won't work, but we're talking about masses of people right now that need housing like right now in a place where they could get hot food. So there's many, many ways. And because of COVID-19, I mean, we've always fought the pandemics of poverty, the pandemics of being poor. I mean, this was already there. What COVID-19 did was, just bubble it all up to the top, and it's running naked, right? It's just butt naked all over the place. We're seeing these visible expressions. And also at the same time, we've got to learn how to reorganize on the ground. What are we doing to stay safe, right? And then how can we build power around the internet and Zoom? We've got to figure that out too. So that's why we need everybody on board and all hands on deck.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to jump in real quick and say that, HUD really defines our housing market. They make the rules for all public housing, for private housing. They make the rules for the financing of affordable housing. They make the rules for the financing of mortgages. And the little tweaks and the little rules that Ben Carson has done over the last 4 years that folks did under the Obama administration have an enormous impact. So I would say HUD is always a powerful target. Obviously, all the advice that you said about, the context and the locality and all those things are true. But all of this gentrification, all this stuff is policy driven. And I think there's a big illusion that, just the real estate market runs everything. The real estate market lobbies HUD to do their bidding for them. And that's what shows how much power they do have and why we do need to target them, but again, in a way that's relevant to our communities.
Right, absolutely. And I think that it's really interesting you mentioned people needing sanctuary and saying that some churches have closed, and that here in Chicago, we're seeing synagogues, churches, and schools being turned into luxury housing. So we don't even have many empty school buildings or places of worship that are closed down. So, thank you so much. But I do, we are coming to a close now. And I know that lots of people on this call want to know, how people on the call tonight can connect with the National Union of the Homeless. So Grace is going to drop in the chat an email where my understanding is she can get in touch with, is it with one person in specific, or is it with, where is the office located?
So it's national.
Okay.
But that email, I monitor that email and then get it out to folks. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great. So thank you so much, Grace. Will you be kind enough to drop that in the chat for me if you haven't already?
I got you, Doherty. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Jordy. Thank you to our guests, Savannah Martin, Chris Caruso, and Kristen Colangelo, and to all of our speakers, to all of you as well, our participants. You'll receive an email from us tomorrow morning to follow up from this call. And until then, you can find us on Twitter at #CancelRent and #HomesGuarantee. And we will see you all back for another field call. Same time, October 29th. Stay safe. See y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Well, thank you, y'all.
Thanks.
Thanks.
I'll see you soon.
Bye. All right. I totally failed. I was trying, like my computer wouldn't load music, but that's okay.
When?
Now we're supposed to end with a little jam.
That was such a powerful discussion that I had to be careful because I kept wanting to like engage, and I kept having to remember that there were other people on the call, no? And so the music, that there was no music, in my humble opinion, it was fine, Grace. Don't suffer. No sufres, eh? Don't suffer. In Spanish.
Thanks,
okay. We all done here?
Do you want to debrief it all, or are we calling it a night, shutting it down?
I think the debrief
Three of
that was
us
amazing.
now?
What's up?
I don't know how this works. Is it just the three of us now? Is everyone else gone?
We should stop recording.
Oh yeah, we should. It's the three of us, but there's also some people still listening in a little bit. So you are on public
Now we
record.
can hear you.